We're living in the most technologically advanced, globally connected civilization in all of human history. It feels permanent, maybe even invincible. But what if the whole thing is more fragile than we think? Because history is filled with the ruins of civilizations that felt the exact same way, right before they vanished. And the really scary part isn't that they collapsed, it's that they all seem to fall for the same reasons. And we're seeing those same patterns today. For centuries, we've looked at the weathered stones of these once mighty empires and asked, what went wrong? Pop culture loves to give us simple answers. A single huge disaster, a decisive war, some mysterious plague. But the truth is far more complex and honestly, a lot more unsettling. The fall of a civilization is never one thing. It's more like a slow, creeping illness. It's a toxic mix of a few key ingredients that, when they come together, become lethal. Understanding this formula isn't just for history buffs. It's about survival. Because the things that brought down the great powers of the past, environmental breakdown, economic collapse, and social decay, aren't just relics. They are active, powerful forces in our world right now. To ignore them is to walk down a path that many have walked before, a path that leads to ruin. So today, we're going to look at why history's greatest empires really disappeared, and see if the patterns of the past can expose the fragile foundations of our own world, and offer a warning we can't afford to ignore. Every single civilization is built on a relationship with its environment. It depends on things like predictable seasons, fertile land, and access to water. But when that relationship breaks, the foundation of a society starts to crack. And I'm not talking about a single flood or one bad winter. I mean a slow, grinding environmental decay that makes a society brittle and unable to handle the shocks that history inevitably throws at it. And no one illustrates this deadly dance with nature better than the Maya. For over 1,000 years, the Maya built a civilization deep in the jungles of Mesoamerica that was as sophisticated as any in the world. They built massive pyramids, developed a complex writing system, and tracked the stars with stunning accuracy. Their great city-states, like Tikal and Copan, were bustling centers of culture and science. They must have seemed unstoppable, but under the surface, they were sowing the seeds of their own destruction. You see, the Maya lived in a tricky environment, with a dramatic seasonal cycle of intense rain, followed by long droughts. To survive, they became master water managers, building incredible systems of canals and reservoirs to store water for the dry seasons. Their success, built on farming maize, allowed their population to explode. At its peak, the city of Copan might have had a population of around 19,000 people. But more people meant they needed more food, and to get more farmland, they started clearing the jungle. This deforestation created a cascade of problems. With fewer trees to hold the soil in place, erosion stripped the landscape of its fertile topsoil. That soil then washed into their reservoirs, silting them up and reducing how much water they could hold. They were slowly, almost invisibly, degrading the very resources they needed to survive. And then, the climate turned on them. For a long time, the leading theory for the Maya collapse has centered on one thing: drought. And not just one, but a series of them. Climate records, reconstructed from cave stalagmites, show that between 800 and 1000 AD, the region was slammed by repeated severe droughts, some lasting for years. So imagine this: your population is at an all-time high. You've cut down the forests, your soil is washing away, and your reservoirs are less effective. Now, the rains you count on simply stop coming. The systems that sustained the Maya for centuries started to fail. Crop failures would have led to famine, and famine almost always sparks social and political chaos. The authority of the divine kings, who were seen as intermediaries to the gods, would have crumbled when they couldn't make the rains return. Archaeological evidence from this period points to a sharp increase in conflict. We see hilltop forts being built, suggesting constant warfare between kingdoms as they fought over what little food and water was left. It's a combination of factors: self-inflicted environmental damage, a sudden climate shift, and the warfare and political instability that followed. This isn't a story of a people who just vanished. Genetic studies confirm the Maya people themselves never disappeared. Their DNA shows continuity right through to today. What collapsed was their political structure. Faced with environmental disaster and internal conflict, people abandoned the great cities, moving to smaller, more sustainable rural communities. The Great Stone Pyramids were left for the jungle to reclaim. The Maya are a chilling reminder that no amount of cultural sophistication can save a society that undermines its own ecological foundations. Which brings us to our second ingredient, because when the environment fails, the economy is never far behind. If the environment is a civilization's foundation, its economy is the engine. It moves resources, funds armies, and supports the people. A healthy economy is resilient and fosters innovation, but a sick economy becomes rigid and inefficient. When that system breaks, it doesn't just cause a recession, it can starve the entire society. And there's no better example of a superpower rotting from economic decay than the Roman Empire. For centuries, Rome was the master of the Mediterranean. From Britain to Mesopotamia, its legions seemed invincible, and its trade network created massive prosperity. The empire was a giant system that funneled wealth through taxes to support its armies, its bureaucracy, and its cities. But that very system had deep flaws that would eventually become fatal. One of the biggest problems was Rome's reliance on conquest and slave labor. Early on, this was a fantastic economic model. Conquering new territory brought in looted gold, new lands to tax, and a constant supply of enslaved people to work the mines and giant farms. But this model only works as long as you keep expanding. By the 2nd century AD, the empire pretty much hit its limits. The era of easy conquests was over, and suddenly, the flood of new wealth and slave labor slowed to a trickle. This was a huge problem. The Roman economy had grown stagnant, completely dependent on this cheap labor, and it had lost its primary engine for growth. Without a constant stream of new slaves, the agricultural sector started to struggle, and there was no incentive to innovate. At the same time, the costs of running the empire were skyrocketing. The massive army and bureaucracy were incredibly expensive. To pay for it all, emperors started doing something disastrous: debasing the currency. The silver coins, the denarius, started containing less and less actual silver. This let them mint more coins to pay bills in the short term, but it led to runaway inflation. People's savings were wiped out, and nobody trusted the money anymore. On top of that, the tax system was crushing. The state's hunger for cash led to higher and higher taxes, which fell hardest on farmers. This created a vicious cycle. Small farmers went broke and had to sell their land to the wealthy elite, which concentrated wealth in the hands of a few. This growing inequality gutted the middle class, the backbone of any stable society. This economic rot fueled political chaos. The 3rd century AD is called the crisis of the 3rd century for a reason. It was a period of almost constant civil war and economic collapse. Generals would seize power, only to be assassinated and replaced by another a few years later. When outside pressures mounted, what we often call the barbarian invasions, the Western Roman Empire was too economically broken to handle it. These invasions weren't just a military problem, they were an economic knockout blow. When the Vandals took North Africa, Rome lost its main source of grain. As more territory was lost, the tax base shrank even more, making it impossible to fund a real army. Rome had to rely on hiring foreign mercenaries, who were unreliable and had no loyalty to the empire. The fall of Rome wasn't a single event. It was the long, slow unraveling of a complex economic system. The barbarian invasions were successful because the empire was already broken from the inside. It had lost its ability to innovate, its wealth was in the hands of a few, and its people were crushed. It was an empire that was ripe for the final ingredient of collapse, a total social breakdown. The final ingredient in collapse is when the social glue that holds a society together dissolves. A civilization is more than just buildings and an economy. It's a shared set of beliefs and a network of trust. It's faith in your institutions and a shared sense of identity. When that disappears, a society loses its ability to solve problems. It shatters from within. The most dramatic and mysterious example of this is the Late Bronze Age collapse. Around 1200 BCE, the Eastern Mediterranean was a thriving, interconnected world. It was a golden age of powerful empires. You had the Hittite Empire in modern-day Turkey, the New Kingdom of Egypt, and the Mycenaean palaces in Greece. They all traded with each other, creating a time of amazing peace and prosperity. Letters from the time show kings calling each other brother, as equals in a sophisticated global system. And then, in just a few decades, it all came crashing down. Between about 1225 and 1150 BCE, a wave of destruction swept across the region. Great cities were burned and abandoned. The Hittite Empire vanished completely. The Mycenaean civilization disintegrated, kicking off the Greek Dark Ages. Egypt survived, but it was left so weak that it entered a long, slow decline. In many places, literacy disappeared. Trade routes broke down. It was a catastrophic collapse of an early globalized system. For years, historians were baffled. What could have caused such a sudden and widespread disaster? The answer seems to be a perfect storm of crises that hit all at once. One of the main culprits mentioned in Egyptian records is a mysterious group of invaders called the Sea Peoples. Inscriptions show massive battles where the pharaoh's armies fight off these invaders, who came from the sea in their warships, and none could stand against them. For a long time, the Sea Peoples were blamed for everything, but modern research suggests the Sea Peoples weren't the cause of the collapse, but a symptom of it. Their invasions were part of a much bigger destabilization that was already happening. So what was it? Once again, a key factor seems to be climate change. Evidence shows the Eastern Mediterranean was hit by a long period of severe drought right around this time. This would have caused widespread crop failures and famine. We even have a desperate letter from a king pleading for a shipment of grain, a testament to how bad things were. Famine makes people move. Whole populations were likely uprooted, becoming migrants and refugees searching for food. The Sea Peoples were probably a mix of these desperate groups, raiders, pirates, and migrants all mixed together, preying on a system that was already failing them. This instability was made worse by the very interconnectedness that had been the system's strength. The Bronze Age world was highly specialized. Different regions produced different things: copper, tin, grain. This was efficient in good times, but fragile. When the breadbaskets were hit by drought, the food supply for the whole network was threatened. When raiding disrupted the sea lanes, the flow of metals needed to make bronze was cut off. Without bronze, you can't make tools or weapons. The entire economic and military machine ground to a halt. This combination of environmental crisis, mass migration, and economic breakdown led to a complete loss of social trust. The centralized palace economies failed. As rulers proved they couldn't provide food or security, their power vanished. People abandoned the cities. The late Bronze Age collapse is a haunting lesson in how a complex, interconnected civilization can unravel with terrifying speed when the trust that holds it together is broken. The stories of the Maya, the Romans, and the Bronze Age empires aren't just separate tales. They are chapters in the same book, each showing a different part of the same process. Collapse is a complex feedback loop. Environmental degradation weakens the resource base. Economic failure paralyzes the institutions you need to manage a crisis. And social breakdown dissolves the trust that makes cooperation possible. This brings us to the uncomfortable question: what about us? We live in the most complex, interconnected global civilization in history. We look at our technology and our economic systems, and we feel secure. But are we really immune to these patterns? The parallels are hard to ignore. We are facing unprecedented environmental stress. Climate change isn't a future threat. It's here, causing the same kinds of pressures that destabilized past civilizations. Our global economy is built on a model of perpetual growth that many argue is unsustainable, much like Rome's reliance on a conquest model that eventually hit its limit. The extreme concentration of wealth is creating social fractures and eroding trust in our institutions, a dynamic that plagued late-stage Rome. And our interconnectedness, like that of the Bronze Age, is both a massive strength and a profound vulnerability. A crisis in one part of the world, a pandemic, a financial crash, a regional conflict, now sends shockwaves through the entire global system almost instantly. The risk isn't that we will collapse for the same reason as Rome, but that we are facing all the same stressors at the same time, on a global scale. History doesn't give us a crystal ball, but it does give us a roadmap of all the dead ends where other civilizations have failed. The ruins of Tikal, the Roman Forum, and the city of Ugarit aren't just tourist sites. They're monuments to a recurring truth. Complexity is fragile. Invincibility is an illusion. The same forces that brought down the empires of the past are in play today. The balance with our environment, the stability of our economies, and the strength of our social bonds. But we are not doomed to repeat the past. Unlike these previous civilizations, we have the benefit of hindsight. We have the science to understand the pressures we're creating, and we have the historical record to show us where this path leads. The collapse of a civilization isn't inevitable. It's a choice. It's the result of a society's failure to see and address the stresses that are weakening it from within. The real reason civilizations disappear is that they fail to adapt. They cling to practices that are no longer sustainable and allow their societies to become too rigid and unequal. They ignore the warning signs until it's too late. The question for us is whether we will learn from their mistakes. What do you think? Are we seeing these same patterns playing out in our world? What do you believe is the biggest threat we face today? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this valuable, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more deep dives into what history can teach us about our present and our future.